Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I am one of your hosts, Jason Baum, and with me today is Marcus Merrell.
Hello.
Hey, Marcus. And you'll notice that we have a third person on our podcast, not a typical panel member for us, although he probably easily 100% could be. He's too busy doing his own show. Very familiar face, I am sure. Joe Colantonio. Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. This should be fun for sure.
Yeah, microphone switched.
Yeah.
Joe is the founder of Test Guild, a blog, podcast, and online conference dedicated to helping you succeed with all things software testing related when it comes to automation, performance, and security. And so very fitting that here you are on the Test Case Scenario podcast. We are in our infancy. Joe, how long has Test Guild been around for?
Test Guild's been around since 2010, but the podcast has been around since 2014.
Awesome. And I guess the best place to start is the beginning. So how did you first get into software testing? What motivated you to kind of start Test Guild?
So to get me into software testing is a long story. I was a musician. I used to go to Berklee College of Music, and I dropped out because I'm like, if I'm going to college, I'm probably not that good because, most people probably, they're talented, they don't need to go to college. And then I got into software music on the computer, and then I got addicted to computers. And I had a friend that was living with me, a roommate, and he would have checks that were piling up. And I was doing I did all kinds of weird, odd jobs. I had no skills really other than music. And I'm like, oh, what the heck are you doing? He's like, oh, yeah, I do computer programming. I work for doing tech support for this company. He said, I can train you up because he knew all the questions they would ask. So he trained me. I went on an interview and I got into tech, doing tech support for Microsoft Visual Basic. And then from there, I read a book on quality assurance and flubbed my way through an interview. And that's what got me into quality and testing, just randomness,
That's what we actually did an episode on that, like that everybody kind of just fell into.
Yes.
Testing.
Yeah.
They didn't.
Right.
No one sets out to be a tester. No. You just kind of end up being one.
Yes. And when you find you're like, oh my gosh, it's a real thing. I love it. So it's weird how it happens for sure. And it seems like a lot of people have musical backgrounds as well that get into testing for some reason.
Right? So many. Yeah. Marcus.
Yeah.
Marcus has a cover
Absolutely.
band.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of started off that there's some inclination I have for some reason, but I mean, honestly, a lot of software developers also have musical inclinations. Right. I think there's a tie between the structured creativity that you get in music and the structured creativity that's required for coding, because it's not just nerdy egghead science. It actually does require a level of creativity. Right.
A lot of improv, right? It's almost like you get in a flow sometimes. You're improving with people, it's just like you would in a band. I mean, it's really, there's a lot of connections. I really could get in a flow that way too. Same way that I would with music.
Totally. Yeah. It's so funny now that you bring it up, because I also have a somewhat music background myself. And it's like the thing with music is you have, because I self-taught myself guitar, but I was taught piano, and a lot of people find their way through other instruments through guitar. Piano's like the gateway music drug, right?
Absolutely.
But it teaches you all the confines and the rules, and then you can go out there with the guitar and sometimes just break them, and that's sometimes when you get the most creative piece. And I think software, like coding, is probably similar in that.
Yeah.
Especially when you're working with the team too. Someone, you may have preconceived notions like this is how the song's going to be, right? And then you get people like, oh, maybe we should do this and that. And it's almost like collaborating on a song, or if you're improvising, you're listening. So the better you listen, the better your code gets, because you're taking input from people around you. There's a lot of parallels for sure.
Yeah, I talked to Mac Clark, who is here at Soft Labs, and Mac is also a musician. And we were talking about the fact that, like, sometimes when you teach yourself guitar, you have a style of play that is just you, and you don't necessarily go into it saying I'm going to play blues. Right, I listened to punk rock and whatever else, and that was the style I listened to, but then I picked up a guitar and I found out I'm a blues player. Just kind of, I came out of me.
For sure.
Yeah.
So why did you start Test Guild?
All right. So once again, kind of a weird story. I started everything randomly. I was going through a midlife crisis, but rather than get like a new car, a new wife, a new travel the world, I said, oh, I better just start getting out there. I picked up a book by Gary Vaynerchuk that had like steps on how to get your brand out there. So if you ever got laid off, this was before ChatGPT. If someone Googled you, they'd find you. I wanted to be the top result. So if I ever got laid off, an employer probably would Google me. It's also before GitHub and all that. So I started a blog, just started blogging regularly about what I was learning on the job. So as I was learning, I was publishing on the blog post just to help me get some visibility. And then over time, people would contact me. Hey, I read that blog post, or I would go on a job and they say, oh yeah, I've seen you from your blog post. But I'm also kind of an introvert. So I have really poor communication skills. So I'm like, I also need to work on not only my writing, but maybe my speaking skills. And the easiest way to do that was I did a podcast where rather than get in front of someone physically, I could start a podcast and do it through audio and not have to actually interact with someone really directly, but still get the speaking skills in there. And that's why I started the podcast. Once again, just on a fluke, 2014. Someone was teaching my company, Cucumber. And I said, hey, you should start a podcast called Test Talks because it ties into BDD. And he didn't do it, so I'll do it. So I started the podcast in 2014. And then in 2016, I had an idea to do an online event dedicated just to automation testing called Automation Guild. And back then, once again, not a lot of people were doing this. I think one of the first. Now everyone's doing it because of COVID. And because I wanted people to be able to get together online, not have to travel. And I've been doing that every year since. And that's when I really started to make some significant income. And so I was doing all this while I was working full time at GE. And it came to a point where I was making more on my side than I was at GE. And they laid me off. At one point, they got rid of the whole organization, which was kind of shocking and embarrassing, but it happens to all of us. But I'm like, hey, I'm not even going to look for a job. I'll just do this on the side. I'm older. I'm kind of semi-retired now. And that's how I rebranded everything as Test Guild in 2019. And it's been going awesome since.
It's fantastic. That's Congratulations great. On that. By the way, that is the healthiest midlife crisis story I think I have ever heard in my life. Like, I was literally just talking to my wife about how I want to buy a Corvette. Like, it's been my dream since I was a kid, and now I want to buy. I don't need a Corvette. I have a 5-year-old. What am I gonna like? She can't even fit in the car. What a silly midlife crisis that would be. But yours much healthier. Gary V. Fun fact: huge Jets fan, just like me.
Yeah,
so I have actually seen him at games. I want him to buy the Jets. Well, that's awesome.
Are you a Jets fan?
Yeah.
Really? All right.
Unfortunate, long term, long time Jets fan. I remember. We don't have to get too much into it, but there are games that I recall very distinctly back in the early '90s that were just you would make an argument that there was not a professional football team on the field.
Right. Sure. I remember.
Yes. Anyway, moving on from my pain. When did you and Marcus meet? I'm curious about that.
Oh gosh. I don't remember when. It must have been some sort of Selenium Conf. We were at the table and you had a BDD thing in your pocket. Like you were just waiting for someone to talk about BDD, and you pulled out. This is why BDD it's crazy. Look at this.
Yeah. That I think we met before that. When I think it was early on in your days of planning Automation Guild.
Yep.
You and I had a conversation on a bus at Selenium Conference, going from the venue to some planned event. And we had a conversation about how to get a better diversified speaker core.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. That was a really interesting conversation for me because I feel like we were discussing it and you were kind of struggling with the same thing. And we had just had a sort of a breakthrough in our ability to fix that problem with the Selenium Conference. We still didn't fix it, but we made improvements. And I remember sharing some information about that. And I felt really, really good about the fact that we that was the concern between the two of us as conference organizers that we were able to actually address. But yeah, I do definitely have concerns about BDD.
Yeah, I was gonna say he still says that. So how long ago? How long ago was this?
I'm going to say it was 2014 or 15 or maybe 16.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that was the first time I had been aware of Joe, but I don't think we had actually met, because I was very much, and I still am, sort of like, I'm always in the background of these things. I don't tend to be in the front. I'm sort of the guy behind the guy, and it's still always. And so that's something Joe noticed about me early on, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I like it that way.
That's how I am usually, but I somehow end up the front man of I'm like a pitch man now. So yeah, it's funny.
It's right. So interesting that you say, like, one of the reasons that you wanted to test Guild was to work on your speaking skills and social skills, and just I find that to be really interesting, because I call myself, and in any interview that I've given about myself, I've always said I'm a reluctant social person. Like I'm can't think of the words. Anyway, that's like I can be social, and I can be very social, but it exhausts me.
It does.
Do you find that to be the case?
Absolutely. But then I this, I don't know if I should say this. I feel like we tell ourselves a lot of stories just to keep ourselves back. This is the story I always told myself: you're an introvert. No one wants to, you can't speak. No one understands when you do speak. You have a weird accent, and you have nothing to say. And it held me down until I was 40. So I mean, how many people tell themselves BS stories about whatever it is? I'm too old. I'm too young. Whatever. Hold themselves back rather than just putting themselves out there. It's really. I mean, I know there's introverts and extroverts, but you don't have to let that define yourself. I don't know why I went on that rant, but I just feel like a lot of people hurts. And that's why I started Automation Guild. I was thinking, hey, because it's online, maybe more people that consider themselves introverts, or maybe English isn't their first language, they'd feel more comfortable doing an online event. But yeah, I just think it's for sure. A lot of people in the industry are introverts, and I think a lot of them maybe let it define them too much, and they don't let themselves shine enough.
Thank you for finding the word. I was going for reluctant introvert is what I was going for. And what's so interesting, like, I feel like so many people can relate to what you just said. And specifically, like, I think of imposter syndrome. Yes. But now they're like reclassifying. There's been so much work on imposter syndrome, and basically saying it's not a syndrome. It doesn't impact only X number of people. It is something that we all deal with. It is normal, and trying to combat it by reducing the stigma and acceptance of the fact that there is always going to be that side of you, right, that's going to try and bring you down. Basically, you're not good enough. Other people are better than you. You don't belong in the same space. I'm not a therapist, so I don't know where to go with that end piece. I think it's just something we have to kind of work out for ourselves. But I'm glad that you did, because
it's interesting to me, because I feel like I'm an extrovert, kind of a lot. Except what I found that I hate recently is I hate just like back-to-back marathon Zoom calls.
Yep.
I don't. If it was in person, I feel like I wouldn't have any problem with it in the world. I like being around people. I like socialization. I like being in all this stuff. But the thing that's keeping me from wanting to be the front man is more around the organization of it all and the logistics. And I think Titus Fortner and I are kind of the same way. We just don't like. There's a lot to keep up with, and there's a lot of arguments you can get into, and I don't like getting into arguments. And I just it makes me, like, as much of an extrovert as I am, I don't want to have those kinds of conversations where I don't want to start a fight with anyone about BDD in public.
Right. I
have strong opinions, strongly held. And I've been proven right on that more times than not, but I'm not going to argue with you about it. Like, if you have a different viewpoint, like, maybe we should air it out. Like, we could talk about that on a podcast, but I'm not going to put myself out there to that extent. I don't know if that's a story I'm telling myself, that I couldn't handle something like that. I don't know why, but it's, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have those. I'm totally impartial. If someone's into BDD, I let them talk, and I let the audience decide, hey, does BDD work for me? Because it may not work for you, but in certain cases it may work for someone else. So I just, even if I don't necessarily agree, if I know if it's a valuable thing that's working for other people, I don't ever play shotgun interview, like gotcha interview, never get.
Yeah, no, that's terrible. Yeah, that's why I think probably because I would probably end up doing that by mistake, and I don't want to be that guy. Yeah. I think so. It's funny. There's a couple of things that I know. I don't think of myself as someone who goes off on rants, but anyone who listens to this podcast exclusively thinks of me as someone who goes off on rants. and one of them is like blockchain. And it's funny because the thing that blockchain and BDD have in common, both of which things I have ranted to no end on this podcast, the thing that those two things have in common is that I actually do believe in them, just haven't found the right use case or implementation. And most of the contexts in which those things are talked about seem like successes, but they're actually secret failures.
Yep.
And that I think people aren't being honest with themselves in a lot of cases. And that's what I'm trying to do with these rants is, and I'd be curious to see if you have any issues like this, hot button issues where it's like I want people to be honest with themselves about it. Because I secretly think that they're brilliant, but I just haven't seen it work yet. So convince me,
Right. Yeah, but same thing. Same thing like with no code solutions. You think not going to work, but
great one.
That wasn't true. There's companies I speak with that sponsor that have no code solutions that are in business. They make millions and millions of dollars and have thousands of customers. So even though I don't see it, doesn't mean doesn't work. Obviously, there are use cases for it. So I always keep that in mind that I'm not the sole arbiter of truth. I mean, it's just something that doesn't work for me, but I know it works for other people,
Yeah. I mean, to that point, BDD is in use by thousands of companies, millions of people. They are making it work. I might have qualms, but they are making it work. And I just can't deny it. It'd be silly for me to deny that because some of our largest customers fund my living with this thing that I...
What's so fascinating? But what's so fascinating about this conversation, just observing, Marcus just went on a rant about how he goes on rants, and then he says he's not a guy who goes on rants.
That's true.
He has it is a talent, actually. Joe,
I love irony.
Yeah. You should get that. I'm going to buy you that T-shirt. So Joe, as a fellow podcast host, I've hosted for different podcasts before, and one of the things that I've learned through hosting is that I actually learn so much about the subject matter through other people's lenses. Do you find that through Test Guild? I mean, you came into it already knowing so much about the field. In my experience, I have not had all that experience prior to hosting it. It actually made me, I think, a better host because I could just simply ask the question with absolutely no bias, truly no bias, which is very hard to find. How do you balance that? And have you learned more about the subject matter through the podcast, perhaps, than prior in your career?
Yeah, that's also another side benefit why I started the podcast is almost to get free consulting. So if I was to ask, Goico Adzik, hey, can you come to my company and talk to me about, testing? Be like, heck, well, sure, 10,000, whatever. Have a podcast. He'll come on the show for free, and I get free consulting, even though I freeze it in a way. So, absolutely, when I was working full time as a hands-on automation engineer, I totally used it for consulting. I get people on the show that I wanted to wish my company would pay for and just interview them and ask them secretly questions I always wanted to know. For absolutely, yes. And also now, I'll be honest, it's been 3-4 years where I've been hands-on. And so I always say, I don't know where I got this from, but I'm sure someone shared it on my podcast. So I always try to give credit when I can, but I'm always learning. And that's what I love about, once again, testing automation is just like music, where I don't think when you're learning an instrument you're ever done, you're constantly learning. And that's what I love about software development and testing. You're always learning. So you'll never be, I am done. So using the podcast, I'm always keeping up to date now on all the latest and greatest, all the AI technologies and things like that. So absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll be getting an invoice from Goico now.
Yeah, I don't know why he just popped in my head, but he's like one of the people.
They're now a sponsor. Congratulations.
Right.
So let's talk about a bit about the testing landscape over the years.
Yeah.
I'd be curious for both you and Marcus to kind of answer this question. From when you kind of started out to where we are today, how much has software testing changed? And where do you see the biggest changes?
I almost wonder if we should do that thing where I mute and Joe answers and then he mutes.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, we should totally do that. All right, Marcus, turn off your.
All right. So
audio.
I'll turn off my speaker and then you signal you when to come in.
I'll wave you on when it's.
All right, let's do that. All right, muted now.
Okay.
All right. So I'll be honest. I don't think anything's changed. I started in early, late 1990s, 2000s. Automation was still a thing. I was an automation engineer. Same type of issues I see now. People struggling with automation, struggling with testing, struggling to get the whole team involved. The same exact issues I see now, unfortunately. I do see maybe a little uptick with Agile, maybe a little more people getting into it. But unfortunately, it's pretty much the same, but it's just slightly different, just newer tools, newer kind of spins on things, but still same exact issues. Like tests have always been flaky. Tests are always been hard to get good test environments. It's always been hard to get good test data. It's always been hard to get really, reliable infrastructure and environments. Same issues today. I just got maybe a few more people are aware of it now, and I think a few companies have tackled it better now. But I think it's the same as it's always been. It's just you really need to make sure you're focusing on risk and you're focusing on things that add value with your test, and then everything else is secondary. And it's still, that message is still something that resonates. And also when you go and get my book, I try to make it as evergreen as possible. When I ask everyone, hey, what's the number one piece of advice you can give someone for their automation efforts? Funny enough, a lot of them are like soft skills. And so soft skills have always been an issue from the beginning. There's still a soft skill now, like communication, getting your whole team involved, communicating with your manager, let everyone know risk and things like that. And that's like some of the top automation experts, that was their piece of advice. So don't know if I answered it well, and I don't think Marcus is going to have the same spin, but
I think you answered it really well. I have so many follow-ups from that answer, but now I'll wave Marcus on,
okay.
and he'll.
I'm back.
There he is. He's back. I don't know what he was probably playing a video game, and now he's back. All right, Marcus. Well, I didn't give it. There was no time limit, so feel free to answer the question however you want to answer.
Let's not have Joe mute so we can hear my answer. We can.
Yeah. I think Joe should hear your answer.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So, by the way, love the book plug. I got my copy last week. I ordered it on Amazon. I wanted to order on Amazon to give you stats.
Oh, you're actually in the book, Marcus. I should have sent it to you. You're on page 119 and 180. So check it out, Marcus.
Twice. All right.
Nice.
All right. How about that? Cool. Thank you. So it's interesting. When I got into testing 2001, it was the era of, I didn't know you could do anything with this. Right. So we have actually an article I think we published at one point called The Eras of Testing. Like there was this era between 97 and 2005 where everything was pretty much API. If you could do something with a browser or with actual testing, there's a good chance that the product was made by Mercury or Astra at the time, or by IBM with Silk Test. In fact, they made Rational. Someone bought Silk. Silk Test was made by someone else. I don't even remember. We had very, very little UI testing automated, and then most of it was API testing. So I did all sorts of API testing. It was fantastic. I loved it. There's so much good about API testing, and then at some point, 2006, 7, Selenium and then WebDriver came along, and it became the era of now we're going to do everything in the UI because we can. And somewhere between 2009, 2000, I don't know, 18, something like that, it was just go all out, create every UI test you possibly can. Everything is UI testing. There is only UI testing. And then at some point, those of us who have a little more gray in our hair, we're like, let's pump the brakes on this. And so the pyramid started being talked about. that kind of thing. And I may not have exactly my dates right here, and everything I'm saying is absolute. Was always there was a gray area to it, but in general, I think you could characterize that people overdid it on UI testing, and then around 2017, 18, people started to try to pull back, and now the people who were stuck in that universe are now really having to pull back and say, "Gosh, what have we done?" There's other kinds of testing than UI testing, and it's become difficult because we see a lot of people that are struggling. And now I think that part of the reason that we're seeing so much struggle in the QA profession with, departments being eliminated, like Joe talked about, and we've been talking to a lot of folks about that, all over. QA departments being eliminated, testing is being considered like janitorial work. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we spent so much time over the past 15 years working on too much of the wrong kind of testing and not balancing things out and shifting left in a real way to make sure that developers were involved. We were testing the right amount of UI testing. We were considering risk and actual user journeys and user priorities, and considering user experience and user delight. And what we ended up doing instead is, without a test strategy, people over tested, and the automation became a problem that didn't hold its promise. It cost too much. It was too slow, and it didn't give you any good signal. So that's once again, it's overstating what's happened. But I think that what's evolved is we are now in a state where we've kind of consigned ourselves to irrelevance due to bad prioritization and bad project management over the past 15 years. I mean, that's a little bit of a bleak statement, but we're kind of in bleak times right now.
Wow.
I don't know.
I'm curious.
Probably a different picture from what Joe painted.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, a little different. Thanks, Marcus. By the way, just with gray hair, just be lucky you got it. Just like, gosh, every time I hear that saying, I'm curious to hear what what your response is to what Marcus just said. And maybe you could just briefly let him know like what your answer is.
Yeah, I was just saying it's the same issues I had in late 1990s, 2000, the same issues I see today. I think a lot of people came into automation with open source tools and they thought they invented automation. And they don't know, like Marcus mentioned, Mercury WinRunner, XRunner is what I was using. And it had way more functionality than Selenium even has now. So you can automate a mainframe, you can automate a desktop, you can automate a browser, you can do API testing, you can automate a SAP, you can automate everything. And so people in my generation already knew about all the different types of automation and all the issues you had. And so, Selenium was created and a lot of people said, oh, it's going to solve all the issues you had with WinRunner. But then people got into Selenium and now they're like, oh, Selenium's flaky, so Cypress is going to fix it or Playwright's going to fix it. But they all have the same exact issues. Like Marcus said, we need to focus more on shift left, getting the user involved and thinking of user experience and risk, and less on.
Yep.
And even Simon, when I interview him in the book, one of the quotes here is he mentions the creator of WebDriver said, if you have too many Selenium tests, you're doing testing wrong. That is the creator of WebDriver. That's a constant theme. API testing, once again, I started off as a performance engineer doing WinRunner, which bypassed the browser, and you can scale up to thousands of users infinitely. Never had issues until you get to the GUI. So, I definitely agree with that as well. It's not a good mix. People still struggling. I still see a large demand, though, for automation engineers. So I want to know what Marcus meant by why it's bleak.
Just because in general, people are trying to, I met a person at a conference in Las Vegas 2 months ago who basically, I asked him what he does, and he saes, "A consultant, I specialize in getting rid of testing departments." and I don't think that's, it's terrible. I don't think he's the only person who has that kind of job too. I mean, there are people who think that testing is expendable because they don't think of it as strategic enterprise. They think of it as janitorial work.
It's always been that way, though. That's the problem. They see it as a cost center rather than a value add, and that's always
to me. I see it as a protector of revenue when it's done right. But I've also seen it done wrong so many times.
Right.
It's like it's hard in some ways not to agree that if someone has 15,000 tests and 30% of them are failing, that department is ripe for being plucked because they're adding zero value to the business.
Absolutely. So once again, it could go back to people being introverted and not it might be on the testers themselves, not actually showing the value that they add. Because I know companies that would have testers, they catch a lot of things before they go into production. No one knows about them. No one sees them. No one hears about them. But if they got into production or have been critical, you need to highlight those. So once again, I think it falls on testers also say, hey, I know it didn't happen. We didn't crash production, but that's because we found this before it even got there. So once again, I don't know. I think that's an issue as well. But,
yeah, Marcus, you have something that you always say about how, like, at least advice for testers is like go after the most important area of the business and test and automate that, right? And
I always say
story.
Find out what keeps the CEO up at night.
Yes.
And so I work for Retail Me Now. It's on my LinkedIn profile. It's public, so everyone knows. And we caught a bug with the user analytics that meant that if a user was clicking around on the website, it wasn't dropping the right cookie to get the right commission paid to the company. So we would lose money. We were referring people to, the retailer for free, not getting paid the commission on the drop cookie. And my department not only found the problem slightly after production. So we started to see a problem and then we fixed it forward, and then figured out a way to create an automated testing method that would make sure it doesn't happen again. CEO learned my name. He learned what we did. He understood the value of testing and forever sort of protected us against that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Risk.
Yeah, risk. Absolutely. And I think testers need to tout their own horn. They need to, like, every sprint review, every retrospective, you're like, that's some tips in here as well that people say, bring it up, let people know. And it's, jot it down. A lot of people say a good technique is to, anytime you find something, jot it down, send an email to someone so you have a records at the end of the year. You can actually show what you've done as well. Get it on part of your executive teams. Let them know constantly the value.
Yeah, we had actually a custom field on a Jira ticket that was a checkbox that said automation caught this.
Nice.
Or something like that. So even if you had like 1 out of 100 defects was caught by automation, like that's a pretty good number, especially if it's kind of late in the product. It would have absolutely gone to production if you hadn't caught it. So that's the kind of thing that we would do. And then we want to run a report to find out like what kinds of things did automation catch.
Yep.
Yeah.
What are you most excited for when it comes to the future of software testing?
All right. So I may be a little too pro with AI. I know a lot of people are going, ha, ha, ha. But it's the same type of arguments I heard about automation. I could point out, I'm not going to name names, but people that said automation is rubbish, automation testing is rubbish, and all of a sudden they're automation advocates. Same type of things happen with AI, like, ha, ha, ha. But I really see it as an enabler, as assisting people. I really do. And, it's kind of weird. It's almost like a seesaw. When I started manual testing, critical, being able to test, maybe not me. People don't even like the term manual testing, but testing skills in general were highly sought after. And automation was, okay. But then now a lot of people focus just on automation and getting away from the actual testing aspect of it. And now we're developers, automation engineers, developers. We need to learn how to code when we go on job interviews. We need to go through, design patterns and all this developer stuff. I see it swinging back to testers because I really, really think, maybe crazy, I think in a few years with AI, visual validation, visual components of AI, it's going to become easier to create more reliable automation without having to know the guts of the coding of it. And so you're going to have to be a tester again. And so testing skills are going to be up in front. And I really think it's going to be a thing. So that's what I'm excited about. I may be over optimistic. I may be wrong, but I really think the way things are going, that AI, especially when it gets to visual, be able to recognize images and drive an application when using images. You can run it against any platform, anywhere, anytime, and be able to recover and self-heal. All that is going to be a thing.
It's interesting. I see it from a dev advocacy standpoint, but just like Nikolay has totally taken to AI and would I think strongly agree with the statement that you just made. And then, others who I won't name are somewhat on the fence. And I'm sure this is just common theme, what you just kind of talked about, people either being so on board, and then others who are, I don't know if it's so much against, more as like, I'll believe it when I see it, kind of skeptical.
But
Marcus, where do you land on that?
This feels like something where I would be very skeptical, but I completely agree. It just, to me, it even feels like something I would be against, but no, man, I've seen the light. I've seen enough of the light. The first few moderately challenging things I asked ChatGPT to do that would have caused any low-code testing product I ever used to fall over. I mean, it did it magnificently, to the point where, like, this is just the beginning. To me, the only thing really missing from being able to make a monetizable product is the sort of the packaging around how you get the code out. Right. It's phenomenal how good it is.
And it's the same pattern we've been seeing over the years. It used to be like bare metal to code something, and then you have these higher abstracted languages, Java, and then Python, and all those almost, to me, act like wrappers on top of a wrapper already. I think codeless AI is just that last piece that's going to cover it all. And you're still going to need to know how to test. You still need to know programming to understand and speak. But I think the tools are going to actually really do a lot of the heavy lifting. And we're almost going to become like AI babysitters almost. I don't know.
Right. I mean, I think this makes it to where, instead of learning Python syntax, you're going to have to learn how to phrase an English question.
Yes.
In a way that, and you are still going to have to know the difference between a good answer and a bad answer.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, we talked about prompt engineering before on this podcast, and now it's almost like there's the prompt engineer, but then you are like, the tester becomes so important too, because at certain stages of what you're getting, right, besides knowing what to ask, you have to know that the response is correct, right? You can't just assume it's correct.
Absolutely. And a lot of people, I'm not saying this is going to impact just testers, though. It's not like, testing so low level, so like nothing. It's you can outsource it. That's why it's going to be, everything is going to be changed. I know my accountant, financials, probably ChatGPT could, when you use one of the plugins for the web pilot, can give you better stock picks than an actual consultant. So, I think everyone is going to be changed. But I think what everyone talks about, especially experts like Jason Arbin and Tariq King, all these AI experts that really know AI, say all the time, AI on its own going to replace a tester. A tester with AI isn't going to make it, but an AI with tester enabled, or a person with AI like working together, it's going to be the future. It's a partnership almost between the two.
Definitely. Yeah. So funny story you told prior to us coming on. This is like the behind the curtain. I mentioned Nikolay, our co-host and co-worker at Sauce Labs, who many of you knew. Joe, you've got an interesting story about Nikolay. Would you mind sharing it?
Yeah, Nikolay, thanks for blowing me off, but I don't know if you told him this. I'm not taking credit. I'm just saying, Nikolay, that I've been doing my podcast since 2014. I think I interviewed Nikolay maybe 2016 or 17, really early on. And when I got done with that interview, someone from Sauce Labs actually called and said, "Oh, can we have his contact number? We'd really love to talk to him." And then, a few months later, all of a sudden, Nikolay's working for Sauce Labs. So, Nikolay, I'm not saying you got your job because of the podcast, but no, it's just kind of helped, I think, maybe. But yeah,
we'll make sure he knows that he owes you.
That's right. Nikolay's been great. He's also featured in this book twice, page 58 and 208. Yeah,
that's right.
That's awesome.
He's also still, I think, the top Udemy instructor for Selenium.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I think outrageous numbers he has. So definitely some stuff. So I was impressed with him when I first talked to my podcast, and obviously Sauce Labs saw something, and he's been great. I'm seeing him at all the different events now. So it's been awesome to see that he's partnering with a company I really believe in as well. So I also shout out to Sauce Labs, who was the sponsor of Test Talks and the Automation Podcast from beginning 2014 to early 2023. So it was a big help for sure.
Awesome.
Well, we're glad to do it. It's always been a good relationship.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Joe, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, the Test Case Scenario podcast. It's kind of strange, right? I don't know if you were thinking. if it was me on the other end, I'd be like ready to go into my outro. It's kind of strange when the microphone is flipped.
It is. I'll do a quick promo though. If you don't have the,
please do.
This book is, as I said, I've been podcasting since 2014. I took the best of the voice and I consolidated it and distilled it into the top secrets of everyone. Like at the end of each podcast, I always say, give me one piece of actual advice you can give to someone to help them with automation efforts. And so what I did is I took some of the best, I put the quote in, followed by some actual advice to think about the quote, and then jot down some thoughts on what you think about it to help you start your day off. So I know a lot of people are busy, but you only need maybe 3 to 5 minutes of your day to start off with the quote. Think about the quote, how you can implement it yourself to help with your automation efforts. And then at the end of the year, I think you will achieve automation awesomeness or automation nirvana. So check it out, automationguild.com/automation book to get a copy for sure.
Awesome. So make sure you go out and get a copy. I'm going to pick up a copy of that, please. It's we said on this podcast before, it's really hard to find really great content out there related to test automation that is like trustworthy and is worthwhile spending the time, because you want to spend time doing the work, not as much. I mean, although you kind of need to balance them, learning more, but there is a real need for excellent content out there, and you do it through Test Guild and you do it through the book. So thank you so much for all the work that you do, and for coming on and sharing on this podcast as well.
Thanks again. Yeah, it was fun. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, come back anytime.
Sure, of course.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Test Case Scenario. Hope you had as much fun listening as we do recording. And you can reach us at community-hub@saucelabs.com. Let us know what you think. Share your thoughts, hopes, dreams, anything you want. Maybe we'll share it on air. And that's all for this time. We'll see you next time. Take care.